It's interesting. Like they'll find me through my website, but they'll also find me through, say, ChatGPT or Claude. So I'm noticing people now who are looking for guidance and support. The first thing isn't to do a Google search. It's now to talk to AI. And
Yeah.
it's something that I'm noticing more and more is a way that people are finding very specialized coaches.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we are joined by Casey Chung. He's been a coach for over 5 years. He is the founder of Your CPA Coaches. Welcome to the show, Casey.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
One of the things I love to ask on this podcast is the origin story. So let's start at the beginning, the lore. Yeah, how did you become a coach and what made you want to turn it into a business?
Yeah, really great question. Where to start? Well, the first time I coached was about 15 years old. And no, it wasn't career coaching, wasn't business coaching. It was coaching tennis. I remember I competed in tennis growing up, and there was an opportunity around 15, 16 years old to get certified as a coach, which involved going to a tennis center several times a month to get training. And I remember in this training, there would be like us young juniors and some older adults getting trained, which was a really great exposure to learning with adults and learning in other environments. And my motivation there was, well, I'm going to be going into university soon. I should probably get a part-time job. And eventually, after getting certified, I became a tennis coach at the university here in Vancouver, UBC. And I continued coaching all the way through from high school until midway through the university. And I studied at UBC. I went into business and I moved away from coaching and into the business world. My program was in accounting and real estate, and I loved coaching. It was amazing, not just the physical aspect, but also being able to see the students progress from like having no exposure and no ability to play tennis toward playing in tournaments and competing. So it was a little bit challenging for me to pivot from being on my feet for my job and using my body, using my voice. I learned a lot of confidence through that training as well. But I had to pivot and build a career. And I think there was a bit of a deviation away from my interest from coaching into working at a big accounting firm. I was at KPMG. It's one of the big 4 accounting firms, international firms. And as I joined the profession, I knew I was good at math. I went to business school for a reason, to find a job. And I think everyone around me was encouraging of that career path. My family, my friends, classmates, but there was always this yearning to work with people. And I found myself after graduation in the company working full time and gravitating toward coaching and training other staff, whether that was on the job or volunteering. There was still that yearning to be involved with other people's development. But that was contrasted with building a career, keeping up with the hours, keeping up with everyone else. And I'm not sure how much you or you listeners know about the profession, but it could be very challenging at times. During the months of January to March or April, you're expected to work quite long hours. You're not allowed to take vacation. It's what they call the blackout period. For me, during that time, it was head down focus. I was committed to the work. I was committed to my further education as well. You had to study for about 2 years while working full time to get your professional accounting designation. And I got caught up in what we might call the rat race, which was very different than being on a tennis court. But it actually wasn't until one of those busy seasons where I was so engulfed and absorbed in the work where I actually had an unexpected death in the family. And this is something that at the time I shoved under the rug and basically thought, you know what, like I have no time to grieve. I'm just going to focus on the work, because that ended up taking a lot of my attention at the time. And later that year, I I remember getting an email from my employer saying, we have mental health benefits available. I'm like, okay, what is this? I've never considered therapy. I've never considered counseling or any sort of coaching. But at the time, what I was feeling was really torn in my work. I noticed that the long hours were pretty brutal. I didn't see myself long-term doing the work, which was really puzzling to me because I spent so many years studying. But I realized that it wasn't exactly what I wanted. So I thought, okay, I could benefit from therapy and talk with someone to sort out what I'm feeling about my career. But after the first session and first few sessions went by, I realized it wasn't that I was dissatisfied in my career. It was I didn't have the time to grieve the loss of my family member. And I realized that it was way more important to me than my job to be able to be there for my friends and my family. And I got so curious about, well, how can I be a better person? How could I be more present with my family? And this job is not giving me the time to do so. So I started to seriously consider a career change. And at this point, I was thinking more so along the lines of starting my own accounting business, having my own business, maybe working for a different kind of company. And while I was going through this exploration, again, I started noticing I was gravitating toward help service, whether that's teaching, counseling, mentoring. And then finally, coaching came back up into my awareness, but in an entirely different context than tennis coaching, but more personal development coaching. I thought, oh, this is interesting. I'd love to be able to help empower others, but I didn't see it as a career path. I mean, I always thought of helping people as volunteering. And in fact, during that time of exploration, I spent a lot of my time volunteering with different organizations, whether I was helping high school students get into university students get into their first time or their first jobs, working with individuals with anxiety disorder in the workplace, a lot of different volunteering. So for me, it felt a bit off building a career where I get paid to help people. But it wasn't until I started speaking with other coaches, and this was around 2020, COVID time, where everything became online, where I started to notice there's other people doing this work. And the biggest shift for me was when I worked with my first coach, who came from a similar background. He was in consulting as well, was feeling a bit burnt out, left and started his own coaching practice, where I worked with him for a number of months and realized this is what I want to do. I want to have the ability to work with people on a more intimate basis rather than working with numbers that, as an auditor and an accountant, I didn't really feel very fulfilled by that work. But also to be able to be in control of my own risks and rewards of entrepreneurship. But it took some time for me to build up the courage and the clarity. So part of my checklist was I need to make sure that I'm financially ready to go out on my own. I wanted to upskill and gain some education and coaching. And thirdly, I wanted to validate, is there a market for this? So it took a few months for me to start exploring that. And I eventually landed on going back to school. I ended up saving as much money as I could. So I have a cushion, and I started doing my own coaching with colleagues at work during the busy season, which is usually unprecedented to have extra time, but during the busy season on weekends, to help them with their mental fitness, to help them with their communication. And I realized I love this. I want to do this. So I spent a couple years juggling a full-time job and exploring what a career in coaching could look like. And it finally got to a point during COVID where all the parts of the job that I loved, which was the mentoring, the coaching, the client work, turned virtual. And I found myself at home in my parents' basement, waking up, going to work, sometimes even in my pajamas, feeling unfulfilled. This isn't what I want. And a few months go by, I take some time off for vacation. I was fortunate. I had about 2 weeks, and I meant to use that time to apply for jobs, but I was just so tired and exhausted from COVID and from the work that I just needed to rest. I show up, this is 2020, I show up to work on the Monday, look at my emails, there's hundreds of emails. I said, I can't do this anymore. So by that Wednesday, I put in my notice and quit. And my plan was at that time to take a risk, a chance on myself. At that point, I registered to get further education in coaching. I had some money saved and I thought it's time to start my own life coaching business. And that was the most in control I felt in my life because I made a very bold decision for myself. And even right now, as we're speaking about it, I'm starting to shake because it was such a scary moment to leave corporate and leave a very steady job, a very clear career path. And everyone else at that time was saying, hold on to your job. Everyone else is getting let go. Where for me, I said, I'm letting go of my commitment to this career and I'm going to build something for myself. A few days go by and I get a call back from HR and the partners and they said, Casey, we know you gave your resignation. Is there any chance you'd stay? And in my head, I thought, no, there's no chance I'd stay. But what are you offering? And they offered me a position to stay as a coach for all the junior staff, about 80 staff that were joining a few months later. And they said, well, this is our first time doing hiring fully remote and virtual. We have a new cohort of students coming in. You've done a lot of work with students. You've been a great support with the firm. Would there be any chance you could stay? And I was so torn. I was in a dilemma because at that point I was already ready to move on and become an entrepreneur. But through talking with my own coach during that time, of course, he didn't tell me what to do, but he asked me some really important questions. What is most important to you? And I said, what's most important to me is to help and to be of service to people. And when I looked at both of these opportunities, me to go out on my own or me to have about 80 people to support over the next year, became really obvious. There's an opportunity right now in front of me to support these new staff, and this would be a great way for me to learn. So I did end up choosing. I am going to stay on one condition. I want to also build my own coaching business on the side. Is that okay? They said, yeah, that's okay.
I love that story because I think a lot of times in entrepreneurship, sometimes we get this like rosy picture that, oh yeah, we have this idea and it's the one thing that we're going to stick with forever. And something that really stuck out to me was like, oh yeah, you were thinking about starting your own potential firm, but then you went back to your tennis days and you felt this calling to really, really help and connect with others, with people. One thing I'm very, very curious about though is as you were thinking about like going off on your own, what was the most scariest part about that for yourself during that time as you were like kind of debating? Like you mentioned it was very, very scary. What was going through your mind?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was in accounting, we call it a sunk cost fallacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I put so much time into time, resources, money, commitment toward becoming an accountant. And within a few years of being an accountant, I felt like I might have been leaving something on the table.
Mm.
But it was really difficult for me to see a long-term future working in the way that the typical accountant would, which is relatively long hours. It's a very defined job. And for my personality, I found that I wanted to have adventure. I wanted to experience the world in my own way. Especially during COVID, there was so much flexibility of being remote that I got used to it for a while. And I didn't see myself going back to an environment where I needed to answer to someone and fulfill the corporate needs. For me, I was more adventurous. So the scary part was I was leaving something stable and steady for something so uncertain. And I'll fast forward a year because in that 1 year, I went from as an accountant feeling so stuck and at times misunderstood in myself, like, what am I doing here? Toward being in the same company, working for the same office, working in the same basement bedroom, but feeling so energized because I was working with people that I loved working with. I had a very clear purpose and I was doing what I felt I was called to do, which was support, coach, guide, empathize, communicate, connect with people. And during that year, I looked at myself as an entrepreneur. So I created new systems, new programs, and new ways of connecting. And of course, this was all very necessary during an innovative time when were now forced to work online. I mean, we weren't allowed to go to the office. And during that time, what I gravitated toward was empowering junior leaders. So rather than me being the manager of others, I empowered as a coach leaders to create initiatives for them to connect with each other in a virtual way, ways to create better feedback loops so that they could improve on their job, on their skills. And I found myself feeling so free and open to bring new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was very involved with our mental health initiatives. So as I mentioned, I was very fortunate to have received benefits through the company, but there was still stigma at the time. Like mental health and therapy is for a certain kind of person, someone that's weak, someone that doesn't know how to manage their emotions, someone with mental illness, where I was on a mission, especially during the blackout period, during the winter, to bring open conversations of mental health to our firm. And I remember what I set up was a series called How Are You, which is like, yeah, usually you say good, great, yeah, okay. But how are you really doing? And this was an opportunity for me to open up conversations around mental well-being, personal development in a way that we've never experienced in a very traditional accounting firm before. And I think during these moments, I was starting to facilitate conversations, build community. I realized, okay, I see alignment in coaching and the ability to empower others. So all this to say, I love the job that I was doing, but there were some constraints. I wasn't getting compensated the way that I saw I could be compensated as a coach. There were some requirements to go back to the office, and there were parts of the job that were very administrative that I felt like I was in a way wasting my efforts. So I set my eyes on a new target, this was in 2021, which was to go full out and have my own business. I've clarified my skills. I finished my education. I saved up even more money at this point, so I have a bigger safety net. And the big, bold move I wanted to make was I wanted to travel and work internationally and manage my business at the same time. And as I mentioned in our introduction, Kevin, I spent earlier this year living and working in Taiwan. That, in fact, has been in my last 3 years. So in 2021, I set the target and I told management this time I am going to be departing, and no, there's nothing that you could offer me for me to stay, because I need to take a chance on myself and I'm ready to do so. And I remember telling them, I'm going to build a business from scratch. I'm going to do it in a way where I could work fully remotely. And I felt like I was lying to myself at that time. But at the same time, I just felt so motivated to give myself that shot. And fast forward to where we're at now, I accomplished that. And I'll go into the details of how. But the reason why I wanted to share so much of this beginning point of transitioning from being an employee with an employee mindset to being an entrepreneur, so an entrepreneurial mindset within the context of a very structured system, toward taking that full jump to take a chance on myself, because that was the bulk of my transition. I spent 3 or 4 years considering a change, and now I've been working as a coach for like full time for about 4 years now. But transition takes time. It wasn't an overnight change. Doubted myself. I leaned into resources. I educated myself. There was a lot of investment into me as a person to get the confidence and the courage to take that bold move.
Such a beautiful story. And so when you look back, what were some of those things that kind of helped you during that transition into a full-time coach? Because like you said, it wasn't overnight. And so what are some things that come to mind?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, there were some requirements that I had, which I think were very practical. Education, like prove the market, have a safety net. But I think when it came to actually starting the business, there needed to be commitment. And what was really helpful at that time was I'm starting to work on my vision, starting to work on my strategy, starting to work on how I want to be helping. But I quickly learned that I couldn't do it alone. So at the time, I invested in coaches. I invested in mentors. I spoke with other coaches and really leaned into the community. I think a big difference between the environment working in a business or working in a company is you have a lot of support through managers, team members. But when you're working by yourself, you need to create your own board of directors. So I saw myself as the CEO of the business I'm building, but I didn't have to do it alone. And that was the biggest shift for me because I felt like at the beginning, going out solo meant being solo. But as I learned, working with other people was going to be very helpful in sharpening some skills that I didn't have. Whether that was marketing skills, sales skills, legal. Yes, I could take care of the accounting side, but there were so many other parts of business that I didn't know. And really early on, I leaned into my own network. As I mentioned, I went to business school, so I leaned into some of my friends that had different disciplines like marketing. And I had a friend build my website, which is still my live website today. And he said, Casey, I'll do it for free in exchange for coaching. And I said, sure, I'll coach you. And it was really scrappy at that time. And I think as well, it was choice. I could be stuck in the mindset of like, I'm not going to get any further. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm stuck. Or be in the mindset of, oh, there's a wealth of opportunity, different ways that I could think about my career, think about my business, and start giving these ideas a shot, taking the risk and getting outside of my comfort zone. It wasn't until I started getting some traction working with clients while working full time. And that's what really gave me the confidence because I was able to nearly, I wouldn't say like replace my income, but come close to that through coaching. And when I was doing that, it was maybe working 5-10 hours a week of my time. So I got curious, well, what would happen if I had all my time? And that's where like the big turning point was I couldn't see a viable future of me running this part-time while working a full-time job. Like I needed to give myself that full-time commitment.
So it sounds like you really kind of established that proof of concept, and that really helped you boost your confidence quite a bit. Interesting. I do want to ask you too, when you went full, like let's fast forward to today, right? And your business is Your CPA Coaches, right? Everybody in the coaching industry, they talk about like, who's your ICP? Like you have to niche down. Like when you think about your ICP, like who do you help today? And what sort of problems do you help them with?
Yeah. I helped my past self. As someone that was feeling a bit disoriented or lost in the profession. So specifically in the accounting profession. And that's who I started working with from day one. I knew what it was like to feel misaligned in the work. And I also know what it's like to have to manage change with a very busy schedule. And oftentimes people that I work with have experienced some degree of burnout. And in our profession as well, you could think accountants are very logical, oftentimes more introverted, that speaking openly about struggles and openly about the ideas that they have about progression feel very open or feel very vulnerable. And often if you bring these conversations to colleagues, there's some risk that you'll be seen as weak or a risk that you'll be seen as a flight risk. Like, oh, are you looking to leave? So I found myself in a very interesting space where I wasn't a counselor, but I wasn't just a career coach focused on resume and interviewing. I found myself being the empathizer and the thought partner. So that has been my ideal client ever since. It's people who are looking to improve their career, or what I'll say, the relationship with their career, to find more alignment in their work with their lifestyle. And for many of my clients, and actually most of my clients, they still remain in the accounting field. Wow. Some of them have done full-on career changes, but this is a message that I want to share, is because when feeling stuck, often we think, I just need to get out of this. I start questioning, am I right for this industry? And often with feelings of resentment and burnout, it's magnified. But when we start to expose and open the strengths and talents of individuals in the field and why they got there in the first place, what is limited is their perspective of what other opportunities there are. So I usually work in 3 segments with my clients. One is assessing the readiness for change. Like, let's work on mindset first. Let's assess how you might be holding yourself back. Let's assess if there's anything happening in your personal life that might be causing you to feel this way, not just your work. Like myself, for me, it was a death of a family member that I thought it was my work, but it was more personal. For many of my clients, they also undergo some changes in their personal lives, whether that's illness, family issues, or family opportunities and transitions. that are paired with a change in values and how they want to be relating to work. And oftentimes right out of university, we want to prove ourselves and grind and do the best that we can. But as we age and get further into our values, we realize that it's not sustainable to be working 70 hours a week. So it's really about holding the space for someone to feel supported in change. And then we get into clarity, which is identifying who they are, how they want to be relating to their work, how they want to be relating to their families, their interests, their health, and inevitably determining what kind of career path is going to be most suitable. And we go through a number of different assessments, thought experiments, and a lot of networking. I encourage all my clients to get out of their shell, similar to what I did as I talked with other coaches, teachers, business owners to align with what was interesting to me. So they get really clear on an objective. And then we get into finally the execution, which is set the target. Let's put in the effort toward application, toward recruiting, toward upskilling to get your result. So I take my clients through a full journey of transformation in their work, but most importantly, transformation in how they're feeling in their careers and how they're relating to the time that they have for their personal lives. And it's since expanded. I think I started working mostly in Vancouver. My first few clients were mostly through word of mouth and my own network, but it's now expanded to having clients across Canada, in the US. I've had some clients in Asia and Europe, but mostly in North America here. And the reason being is there's these challenges that I'm mentioning about the accounting industry are widespread. It's global. There's a lot of demands on our profession and oftentimes not a lot of support through like the human to human empathy to guide toward transformation, because oftentimes the conversation is about how you could be more effective in your job and bring more money to the firm.
You mentioned that people all over the world are kind of discovering you and how you have these clients in Asia, Europe, in the US, and also Canada. How do people typically find you?
Yeah. So I started off very much through cold outreach and connecting through LinkedIn. I think I needed to do that at the beginning because I was starting off and I needed to create an audience, but also create a clear sense of how I wanted to portray the brand. But nowadays it's mostly through my website, and these are people, it's interesting, like they'll find me through my website, but they'll also find me through, say, ChatGPT or Claude. So I'm noticing people now who are looking for guidance and support. The first thing isn't to do a Google search. It's now to talk to AI. And it's something that I'm noticing more and more is a way that people are finding very specialized coaches. I also do presentations and workshops with different organizations here in Canada that are CPA oriented, whether they are CPA bodies or companies or organizations that work with professional development and universities as well. And I do find clients through these initiatives as well. And I think it's a very specific audience that I'm serving. I'm working with accountants. So it's a little bit easier for me to segment my marketing and segment how I show up. I think for coaches that are starting out or who are looking to refine their service offering, my learning through this process is if you niche down, you could have a more simplified message. If your niche is very open, you're going to have very niche messaging, but identify what the psychographic or the demographic is. So for me personally, I found a lot of alignment because I am a CPA and there's trust that people have in my position in the profession. Many people come to me because they say, well, I've worked with other coaches or other therapists, but they don't really understand what we actually go through in this profession. Casey, I feel like because you've gone through the system, you are a CPA and you work specifically in this niche, I trust you more. So I do think of it in both ways because, there are plenty of coaches that have diversified and found niches in different ways, whether that's through a specific service or a specific geography. For me, I chose a profession. And There's a handful of other coaches out there that work with CPAs distinctly, but there's not too many. And I look at coaching in the accounting industry still in its infancy. It's not like in tech where it's quite embedded. Even in healthcare, coaches are very common in government organizations. But in the accounting industry, you could think it's quite traditional. It's slow to move. Yet I'm feeling very confident that in the long run, there's going to be more and more interest into coaching, but also more demand for it because, as you know, with AI is threatening a lot of the accounting jobs. Accounting jobs are very technical. They're process oriented, and coaches help people innovate through change, help people extract and expand on their potential. And more I'm noticing are people are coming to me saying, Casey, I'm scared. Like there's all this AI talk. Like, what do I need to do to enhance my skills? And oftentimes, yes, there are technical skills that you could work on, but it's the leadership capabilities, your ability to communicate, influence, drive change, manage your own stress, communicate strategies, become more of a contributor than just a number crunching, report writing and review, but more so as the business advisor for the company or the companies that you serve.
Something that strikes me, Casey, is that the work you do seems pretty intimate. There's this human aspect that we're talking about, right? Where you're holding space a lot of times for people. When you think about I guess, how do you manage your client capacity, right? Because it sounds like a lot of this is done through one-on-one coaching and whatnot. But do you do all this yourself? Do you have a max client capacity?
Yeah, good question. So I did have a max client capacity when I was traveling. So over the last few years, I'd be in different time zones. So it was a bit tricky, and I was forced to innovate a bit and find ways for me to manage my time. And the bottom line is, my favorite part of being a coach is in the one-to-one setting, but it's not the most scalable. So there are other ways that I connect with clients, whether that's through more of a group format. And this is usually with individuals that all have a similar target. So specifically for individuals that are looking to find a new job, I'll focus on group format because you're able to learn with each other, but also it's less of a time commitment from me. And as well, I do package my material into more of a course format that is available for my clients, so I could streamline the effectiveness of our sessions. And I am able to offer guidance and resources to people in an offline capacity. And going forward, now that I am back in Vancouver and I'm no longer traveling, it's a different stage of my business. I would describe my first few years running this business as a lifestyle business for me and my wife to be able to explore the world, to go travel, and for me to also do very meaningful work with my clients. But I started Your CPA Coaches with a vision, which is to empower the accounting industry and to empower individuals to feel fulfilled and feel a sense of impact in their work. So going forward, I am looking to expand my team, looking to expand my marketing funnels and the ways of connecting with an audience. And this is all very, I would say, very recent, as I've only recently come back to Vancouver to be working on my business at a more involved capacity.
As you're thinking about expanding your vision or expanding the team and scaling this business, what kind of challenges are top of mind for you? Are you noticing any challenges right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me is going to be on what I'll say is the vetting of coaches and the systematization of what it is that Your CPA Coach is going to be offering. And like I mentioned, there's different phases of the client journey. I think it's really important that the coaches that I do bring on are able to empathize and guide my clients in a way to help them feel very empowered in themselves, which I look at more like a personal coach. Whereas when it comes to the final phase, which is more tactical and bringing on members that are expert in interviewing and expert in more career rituals. So that's one hand. And I am also currently involved in another coaching program, education program for mentor coaching, which is about the skill of training and developing other coaches. So I feel quite equipped in my abilities to do so. And then on the marketing side, it's being able to get people access to coaching. And one thing I am noticing is more and more people in our industry are going back to work full-time in office. So there's just a little bit more capacity issue when it comes to when to host my sessions, how much time is available. But I don't see those as really big roadblocks. It's more just listening to the market, because as I started my business back in COVID, there were a lot more opportunities to connect remotely.
I see. One of the things that's top of mind for me is that, you've been through so much. I'm sure you've gotten a lot of good advice. You've probably gotten a lot of bad advice. You've probably gotten a lot of solicited advice, and probably most of it unsolicited. And so as you reflect on your journey, right, what's the most overrated piece of business advice that you've gotten so far? And what's the most underrated piece of business advice?
Ooh. This one might be a bit controversial. The overrated is, if you want to start your own business, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot in your life. Whether that's like, yes, there is a financial risk of it, but having to work even like longer hours than you would have in the workplace. And I came from probably one of the most demanding work environments. So I expected myself to have to work like 50, 60 hours on my business for it to be successful. But the way that I designed it was for the purpose of having more flexibility. So there was a bit of resistance to that advice, which is like, hey, if you want to do this, you're going to have to like sacrifice a lot, which I think is true in many cases. But in the way that I designed it was, I gave myself constraints. And my ideal business wasn't for me to leave a corporate environment and to have my own business that I'm now in a way like tied to working crazy hours for. So the way that I had to navigate through that was getting really, really clear on my offer and being able to set my price in a way that could afford my lifestyle. And get really smart with the way that I manage my time. And the reason why I bring this one up is because I learned this through action. I was able to build my business while working a full-time job and proved, I actually can make more money by working less. I don't have to be working 50, 60 hours to make X dollars. I could work 15 hours to make the same amount. And that was really puzzling for me, because from going from an employee mindset, being paid biweekly or, fixed salary, to having your own business where you take on the risks and the rewards, that was really game changing for me.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
That was overrated, right?
Yeah. Because I think it deters people. It could deter people from starting. Like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And the self-doubt comes up. And then the underrated is almost the other end of that, which is, start now with little tiny tasks that are getting you closer. You don't need to reinvent yourself or create a new product. Start small. And if you're working on one thing consistently for the next week, that's 7 things that you're doing. If it's a year, it's nearly 400 different steps that you're taking forward in starting your business, in delivering more impact to those that you want to be serving. I think that's so important, because all it takes, and this is what I do with my clients who are looking to transform their work, all it takes is starting with 2 minutes a day of something that's going to move you forward. And that'll continue to compound day after day, until you're consistently working on your new objective 1 hour a day. And eventually, like, it becomes your full-time thing. Kind of like changing lanes on the highway. Like, sometimes you just have to slowly make your way over if there's a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
And eventually in a different direction.
Last question for you, Casey. How do people find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So if you would like to connect, you could find me on LinkedIn. You could just search my name, Casey Chung. Or you could find me on my website, yourcpacoaches.com. I also have a personal website, which is just my name, caseychung.com. If you're not an accountant, you're looking to connect, just talk about business, talk about anything else.
Man, your story is very, very inspiring, Casey, and I'm not just saying that because for me, I used to be a pharmacist, right? And a lot of
Okay.
pharmacists, like, yeah, I actually used to date someone in your industry too. So I kind of have an idea of what you guys go
Yeah.
through the blackout times and all that. But something as you share your story, I feel like being in an unfulfilling career or maybe a transitional time, sometimes I think your story is such a great reminder to like lower the emotional stakes. Sometimes there's just so much pressure to figure out the next thing, to figure out everything overnight. But you mentioned that, hey, it didn't come overnight. It was an evolution. It started as a proof of concept idea to a full-time thing. And now you're at this point of your business where you're scaling your vision and mission. And then one of the things I really loved about your story too is like humanize it, being an empathizer and a thought partner for people and just humanizing this whole experience, really connecting ourselves to like, why are we doing this in the
Why are we
first
doing
place,
this?
right? 'Cause
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really, really important. So long-winded way of saying thank you, Casey, for your work. Thank you for coming on to the podcast and just sharing your experience. There's probably so much other stuff I want to dive in on, but I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of this. So thank you. I appreciate you for coming on.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, my pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.